Well, ladies and gentlemen, not very often that I get a chance to have somebody on the show that I've known since I was a teenager. Didn't like him much back then, but we've known each other for the better part of 40 some years. I'd say adversaries and good friends. He's joining us from literally around the globe on the other side over in Turkey, where his current job is, and brings a wealth of experience from playing in the English Premier League, most consecutive games, World Cups, et cetera, all the way into media and business ownership. So, Brad Friedel, welcome to the show, my friend. So good to have you.
Bryan, thanks for having me. Good to see you. I know we've been in touch recently. It's nice to see you again.
Yeah, man, there's so much to dig into. I've got questions that have come from our audience, knowing on short notice you're going to be able to join here. So we got tons to cover. But I think I'd be remiss without really stating, and it's more of a question as it is a statement, even though we grew up similar, I'm a little bit older than you, you really paved the way for not only American goalkeepers for sure, but American players in general to play outside the United States. And I have to imagine, as much as that was scary as shit getting on a plane and going over there, but then, as you've had a chance to reflect on 310 games in a row, all the storied time you've had there, have you had a chance to really think about, like, you've had a legacy change forever in the landscape of U.S. soccer? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
It's nice of you to say it was one of the ones that paved the way. I think there was. I definitely helped, and my generation helped. There was a few of us, especially if we're gonna talk goalkeepers. I think myself, Casey Keller, Jurgen Sommer, Ian Foyer, Mike Allman. We all went over at that time. There was no professional league in the States. It was semi-pro or indoor, as you well know. But I think there was a group just before us as well, outfield players mainly, in Tab Ramos, who was in Spain. We also had the likes of an Ernie Stewart, who was born overseas, who was in the youth system growing up in Holland. Thomas Dooley, who's obviously more more German in his upbringing. You would have had Paul Caligiuri, who was hopping back and forth at times. Hugo Perez hopping, here, there, and everywhere every now and again. I'm forgetting names. John Harkes,
right?
John Harkes. So and I think even that group that was in that 1990 World Cup phase, it was probably even a little bit more difficult for them even than my generation, although it was really hard for us as well. But as each year goes by, it got a little bit easier. But I would say it was a little easier for a goalkeeper, especially in England, to be recognized as a footballer, so to speak. Maybe because we're a different breed. We're not perceived as a real player because we were goalkeepers, but we were definitely over there at a time where people did not respect Americans in Europe. That's for sure. Even as we sit today, I think people do respect. I think the people that are buying players, the people that are coaching the players, and the players themselves that play with respect American players for sure. But I don't think the fans, full stop, over here still do. Like they would respect an Argentinian or a Brazilian or their the homegrown English player, German player, Dutch player, etc. So it was interesting. It was I never thought of it as hard. It's kind of strange. You go through. I played every sport growing up. I was from Cleveland, Ohio. You sort of make the team. Whether it was Little League baseball or a basketball event, and you just like made the next team. In soccer, I just sort of kept making the next team, and it just seemed normal. When it was time to sign the contract, definitely at the time I didn't realize how big of a deal it was. Now I do, looking back on it. And then when you look back on it now, where the stadiums are, the teams are, in the U.S. I'm saying. The academy structures, the scouting structures, coaching structures, the different divisions, the professional behaviors, everything. It's quite amazing that the likes of myself and Claudio Reyna and Joe Max Moore and Brian McBride. I would say it was that group of player, John O'Brien, that really made it in Europe. I think there was a couple other guys, as I said before us, that were there, but I think we were the ones that were there for multiple years, and really made an impact. Tony Santa, he was over there for a while. Eddie Lewis was over for a while, grinding out careers and being important at the clubs we were at.
Yeah, and I think that's from my vantage point. So I was fortunate enough to play from 1990 to 2001 indoor soccer, my largest crowd of 18,000, and I do remember, like, man, it was had your blood going for sure. You had a chance to play in crowds 6 times that big, 120,000 at Azteca during your run, and I think that's why we're so thankful to have you on the show. Is I know you personally, your sort of humble approach to grind, work hard, keep your head down, get your job done, which obviously served you well all the way through your time in the media. You've had your own companies. You are and have built a sports agency and now in charge of a club in terms of its personnel and some strategic direction in Besiktas. That's an amazing range, right? And so I think for our young athletes, and I'm saying younger than us, who are thinking about what's next for them in sort of where am I going to go after retirement or the game ends, that's exactly where I want to dig in. So I'm going to jump into your current role now. Maybe describe at a top level what that is, and what did you bring from those playing days? Like you said, I mean, there's hostile environments. There was, hey, they didn't like us much. You're now in a completely different country, although you did play there early in your career. What have you been able to take that you'd say, yeah, now as kind of a business owner, you are running part of that enterprise. What'd you take with you from your on the field days?
Bits from everything, to be honest with you. My role as a sporting director, you are in charge of every technical aspect of the club. You hiring the head coach, hiring the staff, signing the players to new contracts, buying new players, selling the players. Obviously, there's a board of directors above me when it comes to the finances. I help set the budgets, but they have to approve the finances. Of course, that's normal behavior, but it's basically helping run every technical aspect of a football club. I mean, that's what it is. It'd be, put it in a U.S. terms, you're the one doing all the signings and the trades and et cetera of an NBA team. Going through all the salary caps. So we have our own version of a salary cap over here with FFP rules within the UEFA guidelines. We have our own economic structure that we have to adhere to in Turkey. We have our own foreign restrictions that we have to adhere to, foreign player restrictions that we have to adhere to. We have domestic restrictions that we have to adhere to. We have a very unique club structural setup here because it's a publicly traded company. So, we have to be very, very particular about how we go about our business. And I would say every step along the way was a learning experience for this job. Even in the media, because I have to do the Turkish media is probably one of the most difficult and relentless and passionate and great and and all the adjectives you can think of on the globe. I have to deal with a lot of situations with that, with regards to how our head coach and staff need to deal with the media, how the board needs to deal with the media, how I need to deal with with aspects of the media. So my work in the media also helped that. Learning formations, learning the technical aspects of the club, knowing how to work. I think probably my role, the most important thing is that it's not my system, it's the head coach's system. It's very important to buy players that can fit into his system. I mean, why else would you buy a player? You want to win games, and you hire a coach that is going to play a certain system. There's no, so it's very important that all the KPIs that go into that. It's very important that you understand data analytics these days. There's a lot of companies out there. There's some incredible data out there, but you need to know. It's one thing having the companies for the data, but you need to know how to use the data within your own key performance indicators per position that your head coach wants. There's certain companies where you can go in and get the APIs at the back of a Y Scout, and that's all well and good, but you need to know how to use those too. I set up a scouting structure, a global scouting structure here, domestic scouting structure here. And I'd say every job that I did when I post-career, whether it was coaching the under-19 national team in MLS, whether it was being an agent, whether it was being a consultant for people purchasing clubs, whether it all leads into what I do now. And this is this is what I think I was, all that education was made for, to be honest with you. And it's most certainly is the closest thing to playing. That's for sure.
Well, it's interesting, and we're going to stay on this for a second, because through that job description, if you will, and all those moving pieces, you probably as a player got a chance to see it from a different perspective. You learned how to interact with a coach, obviously, with other teammates. You're now making decisions on coaches and those coaches' players. As you went through that, what were some of the things that you'd say, man, directly, because I'm kind of hearing this culmination of it is leading to, I was built for this. This journey was really taking me here. Let's say on building a high-performing team, one thing I do know about you is your ability to humbly assemble great people around you in every aspect. How do you do that at this level where you are in control of so many moving parts, from international scouting regimes, finding the right coach and giving him the latitude to get the players into the formation he wants? What did you learn along the way as a player, maybe good, bad, or indifferent, of, hey, when I get this opportunity? Because I think liking it to business is, most entrepreneurs think it's all on me. And my superpower is I have to outwork everybody. I have to do everybody's job. No one can do better than me. But in reality, the most successful have said over the course of every one of our episodes, no, actually, I just found people who were better at it than me. I gave them the latitude and then some guidance. So were there any episodes or seasons or times where you'd say, yeah, I specifically plucked these sort of nuances and learnings to now apply them?
You actually answered the question in talking. Don't be afraid to hire people that are smarter than you. I'm definitely not the smartest guy in the room. I would say most of the rooms that I'm in, one of the more experienced ones in seeing a lot of different things. But for instance, go to analytics. I can pretend like I know how to extract the APIs out of Huddle, but I don't. And you need to hire somebody that's very, not just sophisticated and smart to be able to do it, but somebody that also understands. If I say, for instance, I need a left winger that is over 35.2 kilometers per hour and make sure he has counter presses in our attacking third, he needs to know, or she needs to know, what that means. So there's a technical aspect to it as well. Just don't be afraid to hire great people around you. In my playing career, I'd like to think I outworked most people, that I was competing against on the team for playing time, and maybe, hopefully outworked a lot of the people I played against. And I still work hard. I work really hard and lots of hours. So I think the one thing is that work, I still haven't met somebody who's successful that doesn't work hard, players alike. But there's no shame in, when you're done with your work, going home and spending time with the family. There's no shame in that. It's how you manage your time and get your work done. Fortunately, unfortunately, and it's part of the exciting part of the job, there are two parts of the calendar year that you simply don't get sleep when you're a sporting director. And that is the summer transfer window and the winter transfer window. It's impossible. One of the greatest things about football is how global it's become. And you just have all different time zones. You have different closing dates for different countries and certain windows. You have certain amounts of money that pop up in some really obscure leagues that all of a sudden they want to buy your player, or you want to sell your player to them. And there are a couple of times a year where you simply can't manage your time. It's impossible. But I would say go back to the original question, hire great people around you. Don't be afraid to do it. It doesn't matter if you are not the smartest person. You have to hire the people that are really good in their field of work. And then after that, it's about man management.
Well, it's interesting. A couple episodes ago, we had Robert Wolf on, who's the founder of Moose Jaw Mountaineering, went on to do CrowdRise, and now is doing another big company with Edward Norton, the famous actor. And he talked a lot about exactly what you just said. There are seasons in life work, because I think the misnomer is there's this work-life balance thing. And he said it very well, which is it's actually balancing. It's not a work-life balance. There are seasons in between the summer and winter transfer window. You just nailed it. Your wife probably knows it. Everybody around you knows it, that, look, I'm going to be working 18-hour days at a minimum. You are going to be flying around the planet most likely. I know you just got back from a trip in the States, and there's not even time to be jet lagged because you got a game coming up tomorrow, things to prepare for, and that's not even in a transfer window. Mm-hmm. So I think anybody who's listening would say, okay, I'm probably not in Brad Friedel's shoes, but I am running my own company of X number of people. It's very similar. These things are interchangeable, which is we're going to have times where maybe I'm in the retail business and we're coming up on Black Friday. You're probably going to make 30 to 40% of your revenue in a 6-week period. You're not going to be getting much rest. So I think this prepping for it, getting time off, you and I talked off camera about kind of like being away from the football life when I wasn't playing, like being in a spot where I can just catch my breath and slow down. And that obviously works for you. As you've looked at other players or coaches, or maybe even guys in the front office, but let's say players and coaches, because a lot of our audience is in that spot, what advice would you give them? Maybe if they're early in their career and they just believe I've got to outwork everybody 24/7. I don't ever turn it off. I don't ever catch my breath, and I just go, 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 go. What would you be telling them at this stage of their life and what's to come in the future?
You can definitely do that and be really successful and kill it for a few years. If you're going to outwork someone, I think you run, and not everyone will burn out, but you will really run the risk of a burnout. You will run the risk of living alone and not with a family. You know, that's for sure. Some people love that lifestyle. You know, I do think you can be really successful with the balance of both. You have to understand in what business you're in, and when those, you just said it again, when the high times are. You know, you're right. My family knows that I'm going to be unreachable. Not physically, because I'll be around, but mentally I will be unreachable during those times. You know, and if my president calls, I will drop everything and be picking up the phone. You know, if a club calls and I have a deal on, I will be dropping everything and picking up the phone. You know, there are those times, and that you have to be committed to your job for sure, but you also have to know what kind of an individual you are with regards to your own sanity. You know, some people, I've met with people who do the like the 2-hour on and off napping thing. Like, you know, they take a 20-minute power nap, work 2 more hours. You know, listen, if that works and that can get you rested, fantastic, go do it. Every single person on this planet is different. You know, so I don't think there's one specific way to do it, but you definitely have to find what way works for you to have that balance. I think the one of the hardest working guys that I met in the industry of football, I mean, Daniel Levy at Tottenham has got to be up there. You know, I can't remember a time that he didn't return a WhatsApp, a text message, or an email, virtually instantaneously. You know, and he's built an empire there. He really has. From if people when Joe Louis and that group, when they bought from Sir Alan Sugar the club, what the club was to what it is today with regards to the training facility, the stadium, the hotel, the plus the players that they have and how they play. It's pretty remarkable. It's pretty remarkable stuff, and I know he works hard. He works really hard. So it's you got to try to find your balance. But that's a tough old thing. That's you know, that's something that I would suggest you try to find sooner rather than later in your whatever business you're in.
So let's use that example because you were obviously very close to it, and you know that crew, and you'd seen it before and after. So if you take Levy's hard work ethic, and I'm not doing it justice because there have been tons of publications referencing his hard work and fairness, which is awesome. I don't think he'd be known as a tyrant hard worker, which is something different. The old adage is leadership and culture starts at the top. There was clearly a change that you saw. You're now into your new role. And again, I think whether you're running a world-class organization, football club, or a business, there are so many similarities. What have you taken over that you've said, not to be disparaging towards the group that may have been there before your job, but you were brought in to do something, and part of that is to make a change, or else you wouldn't be there. What stamps on culture do you want when people look up at you, what you're doing, and then how do you want to make sure that kind of goes down through the organization, that in 5-10 years, they'd say, man, just like you said about Levy, there's a change that happened. What is it that you would kind of hope to bring in and say, yeah, my effect on culture will be what?
Get people to want to work for you.
Mm.
They have to know that there are boundaries for sure. But I think you lead by example. I want people to work hard. I want them to do their job. I want them to also, if they have families, to spend time with their families. I want them to know that I'm, fair but firm. But you want them in football terms. I can't talk about other sports because I've never been at the top of the pinnacle for other sports. But the time that you're most vulnerable in football is when you've had a bad result, and there are so many cogs at the club. It's really important that they are all upbeat, all pulling in the same direction, and I mean from kitchen staff, working staff. Like your job as in my position is to make the players are getting abuse from fans and media, and then when you don't have a good performance, that happens. So you definitely don't want that to also happen inside what should be a little bit of a safe haven for the players. You want them to know that, you know what, I want to turn up and work for this boss, this staff, this head coach, this, because they're working hard, they're doing their best, and they really mean well. That
And how do you do that? Because I know it is different for everybody, sort of in the, do you use a carrot or do you use a stick to get people to go where they're going, right? I think from knowing you, you'd say you're a carrot guy. You're not going to threaten people with a stick. You got to be firm and have rules. I think we know that as parents, and it certainly transitions into our roles. But how do you communicate? So you come into a new organization. How do you communicate that? I think in part leveraging, yeah, you've been there and done that. You're not walking into this having been, the CEO of Nabisco or something. I mean, you've been on the field. You understand some of these roles, but you mentioned kitchen staff, training staff, which I love, this holistic approach. How do you communicate that message across the entire organization and offer that carrot to them that's probably not just about go get more money and go get whatever. It's got to be a bigger calling. How do you do that?
consistency.
Mm.
When we haven't had a performance, even if we won and the performance hasn't been as good, we're a big club. People will be critical. Okay, I'll just give an example. Easier to do example. We had a poor performance early in the season, and actually it's only been one, so we've been lucky. And instead of turning up at the training ground at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7:30 in the morning, I turned up at 6:30, and I made sure there were little snacks around the place. Thank yous for the cleaning staff and the kitchen staff, and I made sure that as they walked in, I was there with a big handshake and just a conversation. Shooting the proverbial, just when's your birthday? I don't know what you do on holiday. How many kids you have? Like, just, I don't know. I don't have what comes to my mind, I do, but I was going to make sure I was the first one there. And I was going to make sure that everyone knew, like, hey, okay, we didn't perform. We got it. Don't worry. We'll fix it and let's move on. But, you guys are going to be there and you're going to be smiling when the players turn up. You're going to have smiles on your face. But I don't sit them down and say, when the players arrive, I need you to smile. That's all fake. I don't know. I just woke up that morning and thought, you know what? I'm getting in early and I'm going to make sure that everyone around the place is upbeat. I think everybody needs to know that they're part of what we're trying to accomplish, and that's win trophies. That's what sport's all about. And I think if they know that and they know how hard you work at trying to do that, they respect it, and then they'll want to do their work respectfully. That's how I view it.
Yeah, and I think the nugget here is, and I've been fortunate to know you personally outside of football, your deep care for your family, for the players you've represented, for the people that you know professionally. I mean, I've heard you talk about so many people in a way to lift them up and do great things. You showing up early that day, like you said, I don't know. I was there. I think the takeaway for audience is who you are on Saturday afternoon, win or lose on Friday, is who you are on Tuesday. And when people see that authenticity, and I'm a note taker, right? So you're upbeat and you show up not just when it's easy, but actually when it's hard. You got there a little bit early. The result wasn't that great. It doesn't deter you from the fact, and you just said it, we're here to win trophies. That's not going to happen if we are only celebrating, we do great things, and you're crapping on them when they don't, right? Because that's how it becomes fractured. So I think kudos to you for kind of listening to that inner voice and doing it. I think it's a great message for those about to embark on this journey, which is, man, I'm scared to death. I don't know. I've never led a team. I've never started a business. How do I do this? Like, be authentic and show up. I mean, you just heard it. You're at one of the best clubs in the world and you're doing it in life, in real time, in person. That's a huge win there, I think, as we take away our nuggets.
I'm sorry to cut you off.
No.
It's one of the important parts about the character referencing when you're signing players too, because when everyone's winning and everyone's happy, it's really easy to be nice. When there's a player who is taken specific personal abuse in the media, for instance, or fans wait around their car or go to their house, or it's in really, really tough times. The better characters, the stronger characters, the more positive characters you have in your squad, the easier it is to get through all that. And that's another part that all the staff members around the club will see when there's really good, positive, strong characters. Because just because a player is a good player doesn't mean that player is going to be the right one to walk through the door at every club. You have to be very careful about how you sign those players too.
All right. So I don't want to steal your secret sauce here, and feel free to say pass. But how do you do that? How do you find those guys who have the character? I think as much out in the media, which may be easier to find, but probably more importantly, are they good locker room guys? Right. I mean, you and I both know that.
It's a series of things, Bryan. I sort of, where I'm at in the game, I would think I'm about 1 degree separated from someone if I don't know them, or can get their number. So the easiest thing is pick up the phone and ask the question. Second is, you don't sign players without meeting them and going, traveling and talking. You can most certainly, when you get into certain amounts of money, hire private detectives and find out about their lives. There's social media is a huge one for this. You can follow the social media activity, but it's also really important to understand that people can make mistakes in life too. So the one little mistake on social media, or something that happened 5 years ago, or I don't know, even a year ago, like you still have to do more homework. Just because someone made a mistake doesn't mean they're a bad person. Maybe they've made that mistake and they immediately learned from it, and they're twice the person that they were before they made the mistake. So you can benefit from that too. There's no science behind it. A lot of times it's you when you're signing the player, you're go from the physical data, the technical data, the tactical data, and all of that. You're just giving yourself a higher percentage each time that you do your homework that it's going to be a success. That's the same with the character reference.
It's funny you mentioned that, because in the interview with or the episode with Robert Wolf, not in any pro sport aspect, But talking to him about picking employees, he had a really sophisticated method, which was play home run derby with them in the parking lot, or play dodgeball. And as much as I was laughing about it, he said for something very similar, which is there's no real science to it, but the common thread that I'm finding is it's getting to know them. My son Owen, who's a young start fledgling goalkeeper professionally, I found it very interesting that even you saying I want to talk to him first. And one of your questions is like, do you really want to do this? Like when you look out there, I mean, you asked some really great hard questions that I remember him at the young age of 21 calling me, later, like, Dad, wow, it wasn't, we can do all this stuff for you sales pitch. It was, you actually had really great questions. And again, I know you're saying it's not a science, but the reality is you want time, right? And I think that I found that common in a lot of leaders. They're saying, I just want the time. Robert wanted the time to see how did they celebrate? How did they handle a stupid strikeout in home run derby? But where were they? And I think that's a pretty important aspect as you look at talent, right? So as you fill up the talent pool, get your guys going in the right direction. You mentioned, look, at the end of the day, we got to win trophies. And again, I'm likening this to whatever we set as goals as business owners. We're going to go do this by the end of 2024, 2025. If we're not in it to win it, that's somebody else. We don't all get ribbons for participating. How do you do that at a pro level club? Because my guess is there's so many similarities here. I think it's easy to say, well, our goal is to go win trophies. Well, no shit. That's kind of why we're here. How do you set the metrics without going into too many details? But how do you set the metrics? Like, we have to do this in order to get to this. How do you walk in an organization and start breaking that down?
Different in every squad. Okay. So in football, you'll look at the previous season total points. Go to an easy one. Total points, goals for, goals against. Okay, why were we below or above a certain mark? So you go to the XG average of the league. Are we above it? Okay, we're above it, but we are X amount of goals. We didn't win it behind the leader. Why? Okay, so now you go in and you do your homework on why. You do that defensively. Then if the coach that you have is staying at the club, you look at their formation, you look at the players you have in their formation, you look at the comparison data that you can compile with your competitors. You do hundreds of little details, Bryan. It's not, before you make one phone call to a club or an agent on someone you want to buy or sell. The tricky part, the real tricky part, is to make sure that you have a really good scouting network around, because you never know when you're going to get the phone call that someone wants to purchase your star player, and the financial amount is just so good that you have to take it. If that's the case, you have to be immediately prepared to replace. And you can't immediately be prepared to replace if you don't have a good scouting network. You have to trust your scouts. You have to be. So we have. I've hired 19 scouts now, globally, and we have meetings every Monday. And if they're all around the globe, then so be it. They call in on video. We've so far, just for the January window, compiled data on, I think it's about 790 players. It's a never-ending scenario, and you have to be prepared for the head coach to come to you and say, hey, I want 3 players, I want 1 player, I want 4, I want 0. And then if you want 0, okay, well, then you move on to the next window. And
how much time do you spend? I call that the plan B, which most entrepreneurs hate, right? They love this idealistic view of burn the boats at the shore. I'm going full steam ahead. The team I have is my team. I've got my objective. I've got blah, blah, blah. What I'm hearing from you is there's probably, when you say 790 players, you don't amass that overnight. And that's not all just data. It's a combination of the two. There's definitely some secret sauce in there. But it almost sounds like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you building the plan B, which is this player may go, these 2 players may go, somebody might get injured, we have to backfill. You spend as much, if not more time working on plan B across the entire enterprise than maybe what's actually happening at the top level.
I would say C, D, E, and F.
Wow.
So the reason that there's 790, we're now fully fully scouted with data and eyes in 31 countries. So we, not all those 790 players can play for Besiktas. Not all of them will be saleable. Not all of them we would want to buy. They're just players who hit our initial KPIs in our first phase of our strategy of scouting. So then when we feel that there's going to be, they would reach the second phase, then they go on to another chart. And then, what you want to try to do is get X amount of players per position. So when the head coach says we want to do this, you're prepared, because you have to start getting the negotiation, what I would call light negotiation early, so the purchasing club, so you even know the players for sale, so it doesn't waste people's time. The biggest thing in the scouting and analytics structure is, how do you save time? How do you not waste time? There's a lot of agents out there that are time wasters. They just want to sell you their product, and they know their product isn't good enough, but they still want to sell you that product anyways. And there's yeah, they'll do this, yeah, they'll do that, yeah, the club, when you tell them you have a budget and they say, yeah, I've spoken, there's a lot of people out there, yeah, I've spoken to the club, definitely under that budget. And I think the network that I've built to now and still want to build is where we can just make that one phone call to someone and said, hey, we were told that you'll sell the player for 5 million transfer fee, and they say, no, we want 12 million. Okay, thank you. Hang up, and then you're done, and then you scratch the name off the list and you move on. If your budget's 5, that's just an example. That's not a real example. It's a matter of making sure that the players are good enough for your team, for the league. But we have an added one here that's we have to make sure that they can adapt to Turkish life. And Turkish life, I mean, it's one of the most beautiful cities. Istanbul, anyway, is one of the most beautiful cities on the globe. Very easy to acclimatize here, very easy to live here. But the media, we have to sign players that are very focused and very resilient to negative publicity. It's just part of life here, and if you can't deal with it, it's a big issue.
So, in the spirit of sort of been there, done that for you, I love that. Can you think back to either a time period? I would imagine it's not just a game, but either a city that you played in for a period of time. I mean, you've been in front of not only big crowds, but hostile environments. To your point, fans might have driven to your home. Certainly when they see you in the tube, wherever it is, you had to build up some muscles, some scar tissue and calluses to that. Is that what you bring to those conversations? I'm inferring here a little bit, but I guess 2 questions. One, in your past career, where was it the hardest? You said, man, I was under fire and I got it. And then how do you transfer that into the conversations with players to make sure they know what they're getting into?
Sometimes I ask the players direct, sometimes I don't. Depends on how I think their self-confidence is. Sometimes we'll go around them to their representatives, their family members, their current coaches, board members, things of that nature, to get that information. That's all a case-by-case scenario. For me, you've known me a long time. Quite frankly, I don't care what people think of me in the sporting aspect of life. I have emotions. I want my kids to love me and family to love me, and stuff like that. But when I signed at Galatasaray, I was at the gym of the hotel. I wasn't in my apartment yet, and I was just in there doing some lifting or stretching or something like that. I was on a day off, and a guy just walked up to me, and I don't even know if I'd played 2 games yet. And I started off well over here. I had a good stint over here. But a guy just walked up to me and he goes, "I think you're a really bad goalkeeper." And I said, "Okay." There's a few ways you can deal with that. Some people might want to punch the guy. Some people might get in an argument with the guy. Some people might be quiet and just go off in their shell. I just looked at him and said, "Thank you very much. I appreciate your criticism." Sarcastically, kind of. And he looked at me, and he was like, "Is that it?" I was like, "That's it." It's like, what,
So if you,
like,
in the spirit of like a superpower, I'd look at that as like your ability to sort of water off a duck's back. You've always kind of had that because, that was the start of your pro career and you traveled around quite a few places, back to the US, back to Europe. Did you find that was sort of that served you really well? Obviously that, hey,
yeah,
look, okay. So
yeah,
you knew who you were on the field and you also knew that Brad Friedel is not going to be defined, if I put words in your mouth, as just a professional footballer. Like you were, father, husband, I think, again, a legacy maker in our sport. And a lot of that has to do with football, but in reality, it's not going to define you as a person and your ability
correct.
to say, yeah, thanks, sure.
I stood my ground on what I thought was right for sure. I storied Tony Miola, who's a friend of mine, by the way, so I'm not talking badly about Tony in any way on this. And if I were in his shoes, I would have done the same thing. He was able to sign a Royce contract back before the '94 World Cup and wear the Royce gloves. I was offered an Adidas contract, and we were Adidas back then. But when I opted to sign for Reebok boots and Sandico gloves, I got kicked off the national team, which I never took to the press. I was asked to leave the camp in Mission Viejo because I wouldn't sign with Adidas. I then got kicked out of camp because I wouldn't sign one of those federation contracts where the federation owned you. When why should a federation ever own a player? I just wanted to play in Europe. I was never allowed during that time to wear the Sandico gloves, but Tony could wear the Royce gloves. And when they said you have to leave, I just said okay. And Boris Miljutinovic and I we're very good friends now. Today, he was like, "Are you sure you want to do this and leave?" I said, "Well, yeah. What you guys are doing is ludicrous. You're kicking me off the national team because I want to play for per diem instead of a full contract, and because I want to wear the gloves that I'm contracted with when the other goalkeeper's allowed to wear his." I said, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'll drive up the road and go back to my apartment at UCLA." Yes. So I drove up, and 2 days later I got the call to come back down, and so I've always been like, but I think some people in the federation considered it as being a little bit of a like a trouble guy back then. Ziggy was on the coaching staff, and he knew me better than anybody, so he knew I wasn't a trouble guy. But I mean, I think I was right, correct? I wasn't asking for something that was like
Right.
completely obscure. It's like you're letting him do it. That's wrong. Either he wears Adidas gloves and I do, or he wears his Royce. Which and what if I were in Tony's shoes, I would have worn the Royce ones too. He was
Sure.
on a great contract and making money. So I don't blame it on the player, but just things like that. I always stood up for. So when they told me to leave, this is like water off a duck's back. Like you said, I was like, okay. And I remember I was straight up. I was straight up there, and I think I was hitting tennis balls at UCLA that afternoon. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
what was I going to do? I couldn't change it.
Well, and you were who again, we go back to this, who you are on Tuesdays, who you are on Friday, that's who you are on Saturday. And when you stay that consistent, I mean, I go back to the top of my notes. I don't think you have the storied career that you have if you aren't consistent with being healthy, being available. That's how you play 310 games in the EPL consecutively, still an unbroken record. Not sure that ever gets touched. And the fact that your career over almost 20 years, and not many pro athletes in any sport get to say they've had a 20-year pro career at the world class highest level if you're not consistent. So if there's kind of one word I think that pervades this entire conversation, it's be consistent. I wrote down, if you're going to set goals, do it with data, right? I think these are important takeaways. Build a culture that you're willing to show up in. You clearly have done that. And protect time, right? Because as you build strength in your plan A, B, C, D, E, F, you're protecting time not only for the internal staff, but then doing it for your scouting network and beyond. One of the questions we ask here is, if you go back and talk to your 23, 24-year-old self, anything you would advise your then 23-year-old self, in or out of the game of football, that you'd say, hey, look out for this, or maybe this is coming, change this? Not so much like, oh man, I made a hard left turn, I wish I wouldn't have done that, but what advice would you have given your younger self that may have altered the course of where you are today, or put an exclamation point behind it?
I don't know if I would change anything. Now, maybe when I was younger. So okay, so for that instance the example I just gave you with the national team, I didn't take that as a learning experience. I took it as, this is my personality, and I'm proud of my personality experience. When I got older, I was able to learn a little bit more. So I think, like, when I was younger, and if I was perceived as stubborn in certain instances, I think I would have rather been a little bit open and learned more. So, and what I said, so learn more about the contractual status of Tony's deal with Royce, as opposed to my contractual status with Sandico. Why was he able to do it and I wasn't? Like, and instead of and then maybe find the weakness at the federation to be able to get what I wanted with talk and negotiation, as opposed to me being, well, I don't believe you, and I'm going to do okay, fine, the big strong arm, whereas when I got older, I really learned, from it. So, you ever drop for a game? Okay, why did the manager drop me? Okay, is it my performance? No. Is it politics? Maybe. Is it this? Maybe. Is it that? Maybe. And you could start to bit piece. So then when I became a head coach, okay, this I see. Okay, and you could learn from it. I would say that. Other than that, like, every instance of my life, even some downfalls in personal life, I learn from, and it makes you who you are. That's how I don't look at things as regret. I look at them as learn.
That's great. I mean, I think that's one of the bigger challenges that athletes have when they leave the environment of someone helping them do that, whether it's watching game film, you're learning, changes in formation and teaching, regardless of sport, we're learning. And then we go off on our own and start businesses or just have life outside of our sport. And for some reason, learning isn't always like right front and center. So I think that's great, right? To go back and tell yourself, just turn the learning light on a little earlier, because we know older, like, man, we're better fathers. We're better in our community. We're just better all the way around as humans when we're doing that, because to learn, you have to be open and listen. You talked about that, which I love. To wrap it up, I think from an outsider's view, my view, not only as friend, but soccer player, and again, your shape on the landscape, among other guys that you've been gracious enough to name, what do you want the legacy for Brad Friedel to be? Again, you can't go back and change 19 amazing years as a professional footballer, but as you do have an impact on the game and other businesses, including your agency and things that you do, what do you want the legacy of Brad Friedel to be, and things you're maybe consciously shaping right now?
I don't need or want my legacy to be a thing, at all. I really don't. If someone can be inspired by what I've done, fantastic. I'm not negative in that, but we all die someday, and I don't just mean die physically in death. Like, our careers die someday, our records get broken someday. I hope I created a landscape where someone wants to be better than me, because that means U.S. soccer gets better. But as far as a legacy, like, I know one, it happened. I'm 53 now. There's some people that, would only know Matt Turner's name in the United States, or Zach Steffens. That's completely normal and completely fine. And I'm completely okay with that. Like, it can, if someone could have, go to the Premier League and play as many games as I did, I'd love to see that happen as an American. I really would. I'm not, so, maybe, I mean, I don't look at it as a legacy, but I don't know, maybe someone go see how many games I play, try to beat it. Like, go do it. I'll be there next to you and take a photo with you, like happily. I don't know, but I think that we all have careers. They all go away. I don't need to live in the past. I like to live right here, right now, future.
Well, I love the humble approach, and again, folks, knowing Brad, outside of the media, outside of stadiums, this sort of humble, hard work approach is the guy that's on the inside. And I think to maybe restate your legacy, it's to inspire others to do great. And I also think you're creating a foundation and a framework that did start 30 some, 40 some years ago as you were making your way through UCLA into World Cup teams, out to Europe to play, that you were not only paving the way, but you're doing it now. I think many athletes kind of sit back and say, yeah, keep looking at my record book, see how great I am. I mean, you're working with players as young as probably 13 and 14 years old, and maybe younger as you ID probably upward of 1,000. You're representing them through your agency to help them pave that path, inspiring them. So I think you're already on the path, which is cool. I love to hear it. Thanks for spending the time, among all the things that you have and that you're working on and doing, not to mention your day job of running a pretty high-powered network organization. Thank you for coming on. And for anybody that wants to kind of find and follow you, where do they do that? And then we'll get this thing wrapped up.
I don't have any social media. I think Bryan, I think I'm on LinkedIn. I don't have social media. You'd have to probably look me up at Besiktas Football Club, but or contact you, and you can give my
I was
number
just going to
out,
say,
right?
yeah, I'll be Brad Friedel's agent on that
Yeah,
side. But,
there you go. But I
all the
don't
links
have.
to the team will be in the bio. You'll be able to see him here. I suggest you follow it because this journey that's just getting started at a world-class level football club, what Brad talked about today, you're going to get to see the fruits of that, which is so cool. But Brad, thanks again for coming on. I think our audience is always wondering about what's next. So thanks for joining us on the journey. Folks, if you love us, subscribe. That's the easiest way to get it going. Many of these questions came in the last hour, just from our sort of community and tribe who wants to know more. So thanks for joining us. What's next? And look forward to seeing you next time.